we'd like to welcome today Dr. Melanie Wilson, who is the author of Grammar Galaxy, and she has given us the opportunity to stop by the Rainbow Studios and spend some time with us. So we wanted to ask some interesting questions because Grammar Galaxy is not a typical language arts, right? It's pretty unique. Can you tell us how you got inspired to write Grammar Galaxy?
So initially, I was frustrated because my kids hated language arts, especially English and grammar. And that made me so sad because I love it. I've always loved it. And one of the things that I realized was that we have taken, for the most part, the teaching of grammar out of the context of story, which is the best part of language arts. And so it got me wondering what would happen if I created a language arts curriculum that occurred in Grammar Galaxy, a fictional place where there is an evil gremlin trying to destroy the English language and a royal English family whose job it was to try to preserve the language. And it just developed from there, where there are royal English children, his children, the king's children, are guardians of the galaxy, and then they ask your student to be a fellow guardian of the galaxy and to complete a mission in the mission manual and to learn language arts while they're protecting the galaxy.
So you've got the context of a story, and then you've got the engagement of the student being given a task. Mm-hmm. They're important to this program, and that's pretty unique. Can you walk us through the components of the Grammar Galaxy?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So Grammar Galaxy actually starts with this story-based textbook. It's a funny story about what happens in the galaxy when the gremlin tampers with the English language. And it is a story written at a strong third grade reading level. So if your student isn't quite reading at that level yet, then you would be reading the story. The stories take just 10 minutes or so to read. They include vocabulary words that are defined in the text. These are high-level vocabulary words that will have your student improving their vocabulary just by listening to the story. At the end of each story is a set of comprehension questions, so you can make sure that your student was listening and understanding what was happening in the story. After you have read the story to your student, or your student has read it independently, then your student is invited to complete a related mission in the mission manual. So the Royal English children begin the mission by sending them a letter that describes what happened in the story and explains how important it is that they complete this mission. And then each mission is made up of 3 steps. The first step has some review. So your student is always going over previously covered material, but each of these steps takes just 10 to 15 minutes each to complete, depending on the level. And then I ask students to do very little handwriting because so many of our students just don't like to do a lot of handwriting. So they can either give their responses verbally, or they can use a highlighter for a lot of the work, and kids just love that. And then at the end of each mission, they get an update letter from the Royal English children who tell them how everything worked out because they completed the mission. Then the solutions are included at the end of that mission, and students can either review those solutions independently, or you can go over those with your student. So there are units in each volume that cover not just grammar, but also literary concepts, spelling strategies, vocabulary, and writing and speaking. And at the end of each unit, you will find a challenge, which is really just a 10-question quiz that students need to get 9 out of 10 questions correct in order to move on to the next unit. They get 2 chances to do that, and then if they are still struggling because this is not a good format for them, then you as the teacher can design a challenge of your own for your student to pass. The point is for a student to enjoy language arts and to feel successful, so they will do more of it and improve their skills.
And getting kids to feel good about grammar in the context of a story just goes such a long way. You know, it's so unique. It goes a long way to creating, you know, they're not scared of grammar. They're not intimidated by grammar. They don't feel like they're bad at it, which is all things we as consultants hear all the time. Is my son hates grammar, my daughter hates grammar, and then they don't want to write. They just want to not touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
So, you know, it's a theme. And, you know, you mentioned something before about with the context of a story, your retention is so much higher. And when you're just doing a grammar sentence, it's disconnected and it's forgettable. So really no need to reread the story.
Really no reason to do
Because
that.
they're memorable. They're funny.
They're memorable.
They're kind of off the wall.
Yes, they are.
And the theme is so engaging. I mean, you've taken this theme
Yes,
and applied it to about any element of language you can.
right.
It's really funny.
The characters are very funny. They're flawed characters. And I think kids, especially kids who have learning disabilities, appreciate that so much. There is a character in the stories who I don't come out and say that he has dyslexia, but it becomes apparent that he does. And so I have found that many dyslexic students can really identify with him and the other kids because they do typical kid things and adult things, honestly, by putting their work off, you know, not being entirely honest about how much progress they've made, for example. And so students can really identify with what's happening in the story, even though it's in a fictional universe where, you know, there are space innovations that we don't actually have today.
You've mentioned dyslexic learners, struggling readers. You can accommodate writing issues, you know, dysgraphia. Is that by design or did that sort of just work out?
It is by design. I was teaching language arts in my home-based co-op for many, many years, and a dear friend of mine had two sons who were dyslexic. And so I got to learn a lot about dyslexia from that. And I also saw their capabilities. I'm just going to say, if you have someone watching who has a student who has dyslexia, that the older of the two boys who was in all of my language arts classes over the years is now in medical school getting straight A's. So really the sky is the limit to what these students can accomplish. But what we need to do for them is to help them feel confident about their abilities so they don't just quit and say, I can't write, I can't read. They can. They can actually. My friend used so many audiobooks with her students, and using those audiobooks helped them read the written word to a much greater degree. So the short lessons that are included here, the fun of it. I'm not overwhelming students with these long writing assignments. I think all of that works together to build kids' confidence. And when we're more confident, we're more willing to engage in these reading and writing activities. And the more we do that, the more we improve in our skill.
It's a great way to build their passion, build their confidence, get them feeling good about language arts when a lot of people don't. You know, how would a parent go about placing? So this is Nebula. This is book 1.
Right.
How would a parent go about placing their student in Grammar Galaxy?
So if you have a beginning reader, a first grader who is advanced in reading, a second grader who is on grade level in reading, or an older student who really hasn't had much formal grammar, then this would be the place to start. This is level 1. And then this level is going to give your student an excellent foundation in the basic parts of speech, which your student needs to know in order to progress through the program. So if you have that foundation and then you are looking at what other skills might be helpful in determining the level to place your student at, we have a scope and sequence that can help a parent decide which volume is the best to start with. You do not have to start with this volume in order to understand the storyline. You're not going to miss anything if you start with a later volume. The first 5 volumes cover all the basic concepts, including writing projects, the kind of writing that you would want your student to do in their elementary years, are all included. And volumes 6 and 7 are then an advanced review of all the concepts taught in the previous 5 volumes, but they're written for a middle schooler. They're more advanced. So in other words, I'm not just going to teach your middle school student what a noun is. I'm going to take that concept to a more advanced level while still reviewing the basics. So if you have a student who just didn't get the grammar the first time through whatever curriculum you were using, then the volume 6 is the volume, Nova, that you would want to use for a student who just needs a good review of all the parts of speech, the basics of grammar and language arts that are taught in the first 5 volumes. And so then once your student has completed this volume, there is a final volume that is an advanced version of the concepts taught in the last 3 elementary volumes, if that makes sense. Both volume 6 and volume 7 include advanced writing projects. So if your student isn't using a separate writing curriculum apart from Grammar Galaxy, these writing projects will challenge your student and develop their writing skills just by using Grammar Galaxy.
So if someone had a middle schooler, 6th, 7th, 8th, and they haven't been using Grammar Galaxy, they could jump in with volume 6 and volume 7 as kind of a standalone chunk.
Absolutely.
And get the benefits, the fun
Yes.
the fun vibe of a Grammar Galaxy, language and the storylines, even if they hadn't started with Nebula.
Absolutely. That is a perfect way of explaining it, and it would be a wonderful preparation for high school. So many parents, as you know, are concerned, my student really hasn't grasped grammar in elementary school or doesn't have the basic writing skills down. These 2 volumes are the perfect preparation for high school, and it has the added bonus of the lessons are still short. They're not boring, they're to the point. I don't waste students' time. So this is a complete language arts curriculum. It does teach all of those concepts that I mentioned, the literary concepts, the vocabulary, spelling strategies, writing and speaking. But I do not intend for this complete curriculum to be the only reading or writing that your student is doing. I am wanting this to be a Kickstarter for your student to become passionate about reading in the areas that they're interested in, or other subject areas for your homeschool, or writing for other areas in your homeschool. But I also send out a monthly calendar of language arts prompts. So they are games that teach concepts. They are writing prompts, reading activities that you can do that are seasonal, that is free to subscribers. So parents can get that and then add those activities to what's being taught here. But you really are just using this curriculum as a spine to help your student want to have more reading and writing in their academic and personal lives.
Dr. Melanie, I think you have written a fun grammar that accomplishes a lot of things. It's a complete language arts. I say grammar because it's on the cover, right? But it's a complete language arts. And I think there's a lot of families out there who are asking for just this thing. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.